Hey, it's Pierre Miller from the Desiderata Pen Company. And these days, people are doing a lot of talking about these days. And I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about what was going on with me in the last couple of days. So, a couple of days ago, I was talking to my resin guy. He gets me glues and whatnot, and he more or less told me that, because we'd known each other for 10 years or more, and he told me that he is a Christian, and he feels like if more people would treat each other like Jesus teaches his disciples to treat each other, we wouldn't have the kind of big, seemingly intractable problems that have to do with, us versus them and whatnot. And I said, that's a really beautiful idea, but that makes me really sad because of your idea on how we can go about beginning any kind of improvement to our country or our culture that starts with getting people to buy into that religiously. That's not going to work. It can't work for a few reasons. And when we finally met up to get my materials, I was telling him that some of those reasons are a lot of people already have religions. Some people want nothing to do with religion, and trying to get somebody to come over to your side just to solve a problem is, admirable, but perhaps not necessarily the most efficient way forward. And he said, well, what would you suggest? And I told him a great start would be getting everybody on the same page of just what exactly our issue is. Because, I asked him if you'd ever seen the movie Back to the Future. If you've ever seen that, you probably know where I'm going with this. But in the Back to the Future trilogy, it seems like you can't get past November 5th, 1955. The day Doc Brown invented time travel. It's like you can't get it. It's always coming up. And depending on who you ask, the November 2016 presidential election for some people is like November 5th, 1955. We just can't stop talking about it. We can't get past it. It's like it happened last week and not going on 4 years ago. It's crazy. But if you ask other people, they say, no. It wasn't about the November 2016 election. What really went wrong was back in Bush v. Gore back in 2000, depending on who you talk to. And then you get somebody else, another historian or another person who is a student of history, and they tell you, no. This was in motion way before that. You got to go back to Newt Gingrich in 1994. They're like, no. You got to go back to Reagan, the Reagan years. No. If it hadn't been for Gerald Ford pardoning Nixon, and then no, there wouldn't be so much animosity if FDR hadn't tried stacking the Supreme Court and forcing through the New Deal, and on it goes. Depending on who you ask, it goes back and back and back. And I was thinking, well, where does it go? How far back could we go, really? Because, a lot of historians give you these explanations of why a thing is a certain way, and, it depends on who you talk to. And I told my resin guy, it would be great if we could get people on the same page of believing that the United States was built on some, I'll be generous here, unsavory practices. And I told him, if you take this prospective person, imaginary person right here, who doesn't buy into that, either doesn't know it, doesn't believe it, or believes it, or doesn't want to see it that way, and you got him here, and we got a chance to sit down and talk for a while, and I got him to come over to the side of saying, okay, yeah, all right, yeah, we started this country with some unsavory practices. I told him we could talk, negotiate, whittle, cajole, give, take, compromise, whatever it takes, and we can move forward. But first thing you got to buy into is those unsavory practices. And my resin guy was telling me most people probably believe that. And I said, no, I don't think so. I think the United States is an extremely huge country. And I don't think there's a good chance that anybody who grows up in this country gets a clear idea what people who live in disparate parts of the country think or feel or think that they know. And I told him part of our issue is that we're not working from the same set of facts. There are people in this country who I've met who are under different impressions of what actually happened as this country was put together. One of my good friends is from what I've known him since I was a kid. He would tell you that he struggles with it as a Christian himself. He just doesn't understand how anybody could purport to be building a country, building a new country, writing a constitution, all of that, under these principles of all men being created equal, with inalienable human rights and privileges, while at the same time holding slaves and benefiting from stolen land and genocide. And I told him, yeah, that's an interesting issue. Some people don't even buy that much. He's like, I can't believe how anybody could think that. Well, so that was a couple of days ago. We were talking with me and my resin guy. And then I was thinking about my other friend, my friend from when I was a kid, saying he doesn't understand how anybody could think that. And then the other night on the news, I saw, not an interview, but a Senate hearing where, I forget her name, a person named, last name was Gupta, was talking to Republican Senator John Cornyn. I think he was from Texas. And Cornyn was just... He's like, so you're suggesting that everybody has this implicit bias, this racism going on in their hearts? And she was more or less saying implicit bias is something that you buy into just by growing up in this country. And he's like, wow. And I think John Cornyn would be a good example of someone who is perhaps a well-meaning person who's working under precepts that perhaps are incomplete. And I was telling my resin guy earlier this week, in just learning the basic story of what this country is and how it came to be, a lot is dependent on what you're taught. And I know that our country does not have, by design, a national curriculum. There is no national historic textbook. And all of that has to be determined by the states. Those textbooks are made by private companies, chosen by states. And public education is paid for on a district level. All of this is by design. And it can lead people getting an idea of what this country is that's very, very highly influenced by where they grew up. And I was thinking just now, the reason I'm putting out this video, I was thinking when I was in high school, I took a class called Advanced U.S. History Honors. And, the first history class I took freshman year was World Studies. Second history course we had to take was a history class of some sort. I took a Advanced U.S. History Honors. And we covered Jamestown in 1607. I remember this. And in our textbook, it was like we talked about Jamestown and Puritans in 1607. And then there's a page turn. And here we are in the few years leading up to the Revolutionary War. And as a kid, I didn't know anything about historicity or context. And so I just got the impression, it was like 170 years, but I guess nothing happened. And looking back on it now, educating myself a little bit more about what went on in the intervening years, I'm left with a lot of questions that didn't get fulfilled. Like, when I was in high school, the last time I had to take any history, we never talked about we never talked about Worcester versus Georgia or Worcester versus Georgia. We never talked about the legacy of Andrew Johnson. We never talked about the presidency of Rutherford B. Hayes or the Compromise of 1877, 1876. I learned this in the last year or so, and the number slips me, but we never talked about that stuff. I never heard of the Trail of Tears. I knew that Lewis and Clark were people, but I didn't know anything about that. They never covered it. And, that story about the ship full of Jewish refugees that got turned away in the Roosevelt administration, that never got covered. We never talked about Japanese internment camps. We didn't talk about smallpox being introduced into North America. That never got covered. So I was just thinking that the people who write our textbooks have an inordinate amount of power in how we see the world. And white supremacists knew this. They weren't stupid. They knew this. I told my resin guy, it can be a challenge to find a textbook that's not Bowdlerized, whitewashed, misleading, or just does what my book did and just jumped 170 years in a page turn. Yeah, so I guess that's just a story I wanted to tell you about. It was on my mind, and I think it would be great if you could talk to somebody and find out what they think they know. I spent a lot of time machining, and there's kind of a truism in the world of manufacturing things when it comes to intending to make something a certain size, making it, and then making sure that it's the size you intended. And it's don't believe everything you know. So, yeah, I guess that's my story. Have a good day.